It was marketed as a loud, bullet-riddled action flick, but The Last Boy Scout was never just about football, guns, or one-liners. Beneath its testosterone-fueled surface lies a film that barely survived its own, making a scorched battlefield where egos clashed, scripts were rewritten daily, and entire scenes disappeared without a trace. The movie you saw in theaters? That was the sanitized version. The stitched-together corpse of something darker, sharper, and far more cynical. It began as a Shane Black screenplay drenched in nihilism, his most expensive spec script to date, and was supposed to be a gritty, bitter echo of a collapsing America. But by the time the studio suits, the director Tony Scott, and the volatile Bruce Willis all left their fingerprints on it, the film had become a Frankenstein of conflicting visions. Look closely and you'll notice the signs. Characters whose arcs vanish midway through, a tone that lurches between satire and sincerity, and lines of dialogue that hint at plot threads that were never resolved. It's the cinematic equivalent of finding a classified file with entire pages blacked out. And yet, the chaos gave it edge. What remains is a cult artifact of early 90 seconds Hollywood, mean, messy, and weirdly prophetic. You think you know The Last Boy Scout because you remember Bruce Willis chain-smoking through explosions and Damon Wayans cracking jokes while bleeding out. But that's not the full story. Not even close. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Last Boy Scout. Fact 1. The $1.75 million script that nearly destroyed everyone. Shane Black was Hollywood's golden boy of screenwriting until this script. The Last Boy Scout sold for a record-breaking $1.75 million in 1990, making it the most expensive spec script ever at the time. But the price tag came with a curse. Black's original draft was a brutal, pitch-black satire of masculinity and political rot. But once the studio saw the potential for a buddy cop blockbuster, they began carving it up. The rewrites started almost immediately, some by Black himself under pressure, others by hired guns who softened the story, added punchlines, and toned down the nihilism. What followed was a production where no one agreed on the tone. Shane Black wanted grit, director Tony Scott wanted style, producer Joel Silver wanted explosions, Bruce Willis wanted more Bruce Willis. The script became a battleground. Whole characters were rewritten mid-shoot, dialogue was improvised, then reshot. Scenes were dropped without warning. One crew member reportedly called it a hostage situation with catering, and Shane Black, he walked away. Despite the payday, he later said the process nearly broke him and didn't write another script for 6 years. It was soul-killing, he admitted. They mutilated that script. Ironically, the very thing that made Hollywood chase at its voice was the first thing to be silenced. Fact 2. The film was recut in secret. By the end of production, Tony Scott no longer trusted the studio, and the studio no longer trusted Tony Scott. According to multiple crew accounts, Scott was forced to turn in a final cut early. But what happened next was quietly unprecedented. Warner Brothers secretly recut the movie without Scott's knowledge. They pulled together a version that they believed would be more commercial, slashing scenes that hinted at government corruption, drug use, and a more complex redemption arc for Joe Hallenbeck. Entire subplots were excised, including one where Hallenbeck's past as a whistleblower directly tied into the villain's motivations. What remained was action without context, cynicism without roots. Scott only discovered the changes at a private screening. Reports say he left early and never publicly acknowledged the final cut again. In interviews, years later, he referred to The Last Boy Scout as something that got away. Fans have long speculated about the original cut. Some leaked production stills and script fragments suggest a version where the villain's scheme wasn't just about football, it was about control, surveillance, and selling fear. It wasn't just recut, it was defanged. Fact 3. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans couldn't stand each other. On screen, their chemistry crackles. Off screen, it was another story entirely. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans may have played reluctant allies, but behind the scenes, their tension was so thick it bled into production. Crew members reported constant bickering between takes. Wayans allegedly felt Willis was condescending. Willis, in turn, thought Wayans was out of his depth in a dramatic role. Their animosity reached a breaking point during a key night shoot. Wayans reportedly walked off set after an argument over a line change. Shooting was halted for hours. Tony Scott had to personally intervene. The tension shaped the film. Several joint scenes were cut short or rewritten altogether. Their physical spacing in scenes often standing apart, rarely making eye contact, wasn't just staging, it was real. Some even believe the palpable resentment added an edge to their performances, making the banter more biting, the distrust more authentic. But that came at a cost. The planned sequel was quietly immediately shelved. Not because of box office numbers, but because neither actor wanted to work with the other again. What the audience saw was electricity. What the crew saw was a powder keg. Fact 4. The original ending was so bleak, it was shelved. In the earliest drafts, The Last Boy Scout didn't end with a triumphant touchdown or a sarcastic buddy moment. It ended with a funeral. Shane Black's original ending had Joe Hallenbeck failing to save the senator. The conspiracy succeeded. Milo escaped, and Hallenbeck, wounded, drunk, and jobless, walked alone into a storm, mumbling about how America rewards the wrong heroes. Test audiences reportedly hated it. Producers panicked. They demanded reshoots to deliver something more upbeat. Out went the bitter monologue. In came the helicopter fight, the football stunt, and the obligatory high five. But traces of the original tone still linger. Hallenbeck's final speech is weirdly disjointed, spliced together from multiple takes, and Milo's abrupt demise feels almost too convenient because in the first ending, he didn't die, he vanished. Some claim a print of the darker cut was screened internally and locked away. Others say it never made it past storyboards. But one thing is clear. The ending we got was a stitched-on smile over a broken jaw. The film wasn't meant to give you hope. It was supposed to leave you cold. Fact 5. The body count was deliberately inflated. Violence wasn't just a byproduct, it was a strategy. According to an internal memo leaked after the film's release, Warner Brothers believed the movie could stand out in a crowded market only if it set a new bar for on-screen violence. The directive? Push the limit. No slow deaths. Make it loud. Tony Scott took it to heart. Bullets tore through scenes with abandon. By the final reel, nearly 90 people had died, making it one of the bloodiest mainstream action films of its decade. But not all deaths were narrative. Some were visual padding. Extras were shot simply to raise the count. One assistant director even joked that if you didn't have blood on your shirt, you weren't doing your job. Critics panned it. Audiences cheered. And the body count? It became part of the film's legend, so extreme it bordered on parody, yet never quite crossed into satire. The Last Boy Scout wasn't just violent, it was violent on purpose. Fact 6. The Football League in the film was a legal fiction. You never see the NFL logo in The Last Boy Scout. That's not an accident. From the start, the NFL refused to cooperate with the production. Shane Black's script featuring drug-addicted players, corrupt owners, and stadium assassinations was deemed defamatory by league lawyers. They threatened to sue if the film used real team names or logos. So the filmmakers created a fictional league. Team uniforms were designed from scratch, mimicking real franchises without crossing legal lines. Stadiums were redressed with fake banners. Even the footballs were custom branded. But here's the twist. The characters talk about real teams. Hallenbeck makes offhand comments about the Raiders and Cowboys. One villain references the Super Bowl. These weren't oversights, they were intentional legal bait and switches. The strategy worked. The NFL never sued. But the result is uncanny. A world that looks like ours, but isn't. Familiar enough to feel real, distorted enough to feel wrong. It's not just a legal workaround. It's part of the film's surreal charm. Fact 7. Tony Scott shot the film like a music video and was told to stop. Tony Scott was known for his kinetic visual style, blazing lights, saturated colors, and aggressive camera moves. But on The Last Boy Scout, that signature flair drew backlash from his own producers. Midway through the shoot, Joel Silver reportedly pulled Scott aside and told him, bluntly, "This isn't a Duran Duran video, cut the SH times T." Scott had been using smoke machines, strobe lighting, and handheld cameras to stylize even mundane scenes, turning locker room chats into noir dreamscapes. But the studio feared this made the film too artsy for a mainstream action audience. Tension escalated. Some scenes were reshot under tighter visual constraints. Others were color-corrected in post to dull the edges. But Scott didn't back down. He doubled down on visual motifs like the recurring use of blinking neon and reflective surfaces to subtly reinforce the film's themes of illusion and corruption. The result? A movie that looked nothing like its peer. Critics didn't know what to make of it. But years later, it's exactly that off-kilter visual style that keeps the film alive in cult circles. Fact 8. The exploding light bulb scene was banned in multiple countries. It's one of the film's most vicious moments. Joe Hallenbeck rigs a light bulb to explode in a thug's face, blinding him instantly. The scene was brutal, graphic, and shockingly inventive. But in several international markets, including Germany and Australia, censors flagged it as a replicable act of household violence. Their concern? Viewers might mimic the stunt using real light bulbs and exposed wiring, rather than trim the scene. Warner Brothers chose to cut it entirely for those regions. On VHS copies overseas, the sequence jumps abruptly. One moment Hallenbeck is cornered, the next the thug is screaming off-screen. Fans were confused. Some believed they had defective copies. Others thought it was an editing error. Only years later, when uncut versions surfaced, did audiences realize the scene wasn't missing by mistake. It was missing because it hit too close to home. Fact 9. The studio wanted to fire Damon Wayans mid-shoot. Damon Wayans was hot off in Living Color, but he wasn't the studio's first choice, or even their second. Executives had reservations about his comedic background, and once filming began, tensions rose. Wayans challenged rewrites, clashed with Bruce Willis, and refused to deliver lines he felt were lazy stereotype. Joel Silver was reportedly livid. At one point, he lobbied to replace Wayans entirely, halfway through production. The idea? Rewrite the character as a white ex-cop and reshoot his scenes with a different actor. Tony Scott resisted. He believed Wayans' edge brought balance to Willis's cynicism. After several tense days of meetings, a compromise was struck. Wayans stayed, but with a reduced arc. Several of his more dramatic scenes were cut in post. Watch the final film closely, and you'll notice it. Jimmy Dix begins with depth, a man haunted by addiction and guilt, but by the third act, he's mostly comic relief. It wasn't accidental, it was a negotiated edit. Fact 10. The opening scene was a last-minute addition. The rain-soaked football sequence that opens The Last Boy Scout wasn't in the original script. It was added just weeks before filming wrapped for one reason only. The studio thought the movie wasn't shocking enough. Executives pushed for a jarring cold open that would grab audiences by the throat. Shane Black objected. Tony Scott hesitated, but Joel Silver insisted, and the scene was greenlit under rushed conditions. Shot over 2 nights in a drenched stadium set, the sequence depicts a desperate player pulling a gun mid-game and shooting defenders before taking his own life. The moment was so visceral that even the crew went silent after the final take. Some editors felt it was too extreme. Others worried it overshadowed the rest of the film. But the studio loved it and made it the very first thing viewers would see. There's irony in that choice. A sequence designed to provoke, inserted after the story was already done. A bang at the beginning of a film that was falling apart by the end. Fact 11. The dialogue was so profane, it set a new record. You probably remember the wisecracks, but what you might not realize is that The Last Boy Scout quietly held the record for most F-words in a studio action movie at the time. The film's script contains over 100 uses of the word, not including variations and creative combinations. Shane Black's original draft was even more profane, using expletives as punctuation to underscore the film's anger and absurdity. During test screenings, audiences laughed. Censors didn't. The MPAA initially threatened to give the film an NC-17 unless certain lines were removed. But instead of trimming, the studio negotiated to keep the language intact, citing the fantasy tone of the violent. The final cut remains gloriously foul-mouthed, with Bruce Willis delivering one-liners that would make John McClane blush. It's not just crude, it's character-driven profanity, a window into a world where decency's already dead. Fact 12. The final fight scene was changed after a stuntman got hurt. The climactic fight between Hallenbeck and Milo on the stadium lights was supposed to be longer, dirtier, more desperate. In early stunt rehearsals, Milo was scripted to dangle from a collapsing scaffold, while Hallenbeck taunted him with a cigarette lighter, a callback to their earlier confrontation. But during a late-night setup, a stuntman playing Milo's double slipped during a take and cracked 2 ribs on the lighting rig. Production halted, safety protocols were reviewed, and Tony Scott, already under fire for budget overruns, was forced to simplify the scene. The result? A more abrupt final showdown where Milo's fall feels sudden and unearned. Critics called it anticlimactic, but few knew it was rewritten on the fly to avoid another injury. Ironically, the toned-down ending created an aura of mystery. Viewers debated whether Milo truly died or simply vanished, especially given how little closure the film provides. What started as an accident became an ambiguity. A final twist. Born from real pain. Fact 13. Halle Berry's role was originally twice as long. Before she became a star, Halle Berry had a small but striking role as Corey, Jimmy Dix's girlfriend. But originally, her character wasn't just a plot device, she was the emotional spine of the first act. In early drafts, and even during early shooting schedules, Corey had multiple scenes fleshing out her relationship with Jimmy. She wasn't just a dancer in trouble, she was a complex figure torn between survival and loyalty. One deleted scene showed her confronting a corrupt manager. Another had her reconciling with Jimmy before her death. But in post-production, Corey's presence was nearly erased. The pacing was deemed too slow. Test audiences didn't connect. The studio decided that a faster, grittier narrative mattered more than emotional stakes. Barry later mentioned in an interview that she was disappointed but not surprised, saying, "They weren't trying to tell her story, they just wanted her dead. It wasn't a performance issue, it was a tone decision." The result? A character meant to anchor the plot became a casualty on screen and off. Fact 14. One scene was so graphic, even Joel Silver said cut it. Joel Silver is known for pushing boundaries, but even he had a line. Midway through production, a torture scene was filmed involving Hallenbeck and a pair of corrupt cops. The scene included a red-hot car lighter, a broken finger, and a monologue about what pain smells like. Crew members described it as sadistic, even by Lethal Weapon standard. Tony Scott shot it with close-ups and heavy shadow, leaning into psychological horror. Shane Black loved it. Damon Wayans didn't. When early cuts were screened, Silver reportedly stood up mid-scene and said, "Cut it. It's not say 7," and the entire sequence was dropped. No footage of it has ever surfaced publicly, and the scene is missing from all shooting scripts, likely erased to avoid studio liability. But those who were there say it was the most intense thing filmed for the movie, and its absence is still debated in cult circles. Some say it broke the film's pacing. Others say it was too real for a movie that didn't want to admit how dark it actually was. Fact 15. There was a real gun on set and it caused a shutdown. Accidents on film sets happen, but what occurred during week 4 of The Last Boy Scout wasn't an accident. It was a mistake that could have ended careers. During filming of a close-quarters shootout, a prop master mistakenly handed an actor a real, loaded handgun instead of a rubber dummy. The scene called for the actor to point the gun at Bruce Willis unloaded, of course, but something didn't feel right. Willis reportedly stopped mid-rehearsal and said, "This feels heavy." A weapons supervisor was called. The set was locked down. And yes, there was a live round in the chamber. Production halted for a full day while an internal investigation took place. The responsible crew member was fired on the spot. New safety protocols were implemented immediately after, including triple checks and daily safety briefings. No one was hurt, but the incident cast a shadow over the rest of the shoot and added to the already toxic atmosphere on set. It's a reminder that behind the jokes and explosions, danger wasn't just scripted, it was real. Fact 16. The film's tagline was written by a drunk executive at 3 amperes. It's just a game. You think you're tough enough? That was one of the many promotional taglines slapped onto The Last Boy Scout. But it wasn't from a marketing firm or creative team. It was a drunken improvisation typed at 3 a.m. by a Warner Brothers executive in a moment of desperation. According to internal memos leaked years later, the marketing department had no idea how to sell the movie. Was it a buddy comedy? A violent thriller? A sports conspiracy? Nothing quite fit. Weeks before the teaser trailer was due, a frustrated VP reportedly poured himself 3 bourbons, opened a Word doc, and hammered out a list of placeholder lines. One of them stuck. No one liked it, but no one had anything better. It ended up on posters, VHS covers, and international trailers. Critics mocked it. Fans ignored it. Even Bruce Willis, in a press junket, rolled his eyes and said, "That's the dumbest line I've ever seen under my face." Sometimes, the chaos of a film bleeds into the marketing. This time, it bled bourbon. Fact 17. Milo's actor improvised his creepiest line. Every great action movie needs a villain. Milo, played by Taylor Negron, was something else entirely. Silken voice, dead eyes, and a nihilistic smirk, he brought menace in whispers, not roars. But his creepiest moment wasn't in the script. In the scene where he confronts Hallenbeck and says, "Touch me again and I'll kill you," then smiles and adds, "And I'll do it slow." That second line was entirely improvised. Negron, a trained theater actor, believed Milo would be more unsettling if he never raised his voice, so he began layering in extra lines, smooth, poetic, and horrifying. Tony Scott loved it. Joel Silver didn't care, as long as it stayed under budget. The line stuck. It became iconic in cult circles, quoted in forums and fan shirts. Ironically, Negron once said he based Milo on a gym trainer who was too polite, and that's what made him terrifying. Villainy, he believed, should never try too hard. Fact 18. The rain was real and it nearly ruined the cameras. Rain is everywhere in The Last Boy Scout, not metaphorically, literally. Half the movie seems drenched, glistening with wet asphalt and steam. That's not CGI or studio effects. It's real weather. Filming began during an unusually rainy winter in Los Angeles. Tony Scott insisted on embracing it, refusing to delay production. He thought it added texture, mood, and desperation to every scene. But there was a problem. The cameras weren't built for it. Water seeped into lenses, sound gear shorted out, several reels were unusable due to fogging. One key camera was fried entirely during a night shoot, costing the production tens of thousands of dollars. Insurance refused to cover weather damage. Crew members started calling the shoot Waterworld, Noir Edition. Still, Scott pushed forward. He believed the rain gave the film a grimy authenticity, and in hindsight, he was right. Because of that choice, The Last Boy Scout doesn't just look like a gritty 90 seconds action film. It feels like one soaked in gasoline and lit with lightning. Fact 19. A secret cameo was hidden in the crowd. There's a scene midway through The Last Boy Scout set in a crowded football stadium, filled with chaos, gunfire, and screaming fans. But hidden in one of the wide crowd shots is a face most viewers never noticed. Shane Black himself, the original screenwriter. Wearing a dark cap and sunglasses, Black stands frozen in the background during a moment of panic, arms crossed, not reacting. It wasn't part of the plan. According to crew sources, he showed up unannounced during filming and refused to leave the lot. Out of frustration, someone joked, "Just give him a damn pass and let him be in the movie." So they did. It's less of a cameo than a quiet act of rebellion. Black had been pushed aside creatively, and his script rewritten beyond recognition. Appearing in the background was his way of saying, "I'm still here. This is still mine, even if you wrecked it." It's an Easter egg, few noticed, but once you see him, he never blends back in. Fact 20. The test screenings were a disaster and then a triumph. When The Last Boy Scout was first screened for test audiences, the response was brutal. Viewers called it confusing, mean-spirited, and all over the place. Cards were filled with complaints about the tone, the plot, and the unlikable characters. Joel Silver panicked. Tony Scott was furious. Bruce Willis refused to do reshoots, but then something strange happened. A second round of screenings, this time with a younger, late-night audience, produced the opposite reaction. The crowd laughed, cheered, quoted one-liners before they finished. One audience member wrote, "It's insane, but I want to see it again." The studio didn't know what to make of it, neither did the critics. But Silver understood one thing. He had a cult film in his hands, not a mainstream hit. So the marketing changed. TV spots emphasized explosions, sarcasm, and Bruce Willis's name. The deeper themes were buried, the darker scenes cut. And just like that, a movie that almost collapsed in the edit room found its audience not because it played safe, but because it didn't. It wasn't clean. It was unforgettable. Bonus fact: the film predicted the NFL scandal 12 years early. In The Last Boy Scout, a football team owner rigs games, bribes politicians, and talks openly about using gambling to control the league's future. In 1991, that was cartoonish. But in 2003, headlines broke about a real-life NFL executive with alleged ties to illegal betting rings, payoffs, and internal cover-ups. Whistleblowers emerged. Investigations vanished. The league's public image remained spotless, but cracks had formed. Fans went back and rewatched the movie. Some began to wonder, was Shane Black's script just satire or a warning? One line from the villain, "You control the score, you control the money. Everything else is just noise," suddenly felt like a manifesto, not a punchline. It's not proof, but it's airy. Sometimes, pulp fiction doesn't just reflect reality. Sometimes, it outruns it. What if The Last Boy Scout was never broken, just misunderstood? Tell us in the comment, which fact blew your mind the most? And do you think the studio destroyed the film's true potential or saved it from itself? If you enjoyed the chaos, the conspiracies, and the bullets, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us what movie we should unravel next. We're just getting started.